Which Buccaneers could surprise some people as training camp opens up? That and more on today's episode of Locked On Bucs.
You are Locked On Buccaneers, your daily Tampa Bay Buccaneers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, and welcome into this episode of Locked On Bucs, your daily podcast covering the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to thank you for making Locked On Bucs your first listener view every day. Don't forget you can subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. And of course, you can follow along on Twitter. I am James Yarcho at JYarcho_Bucs, credentialed member of the media covering the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, here with you every Monday through Friday, along with the everydayers. And for that, I want to share my appreciation for your continued support of the show. One of the ways you can support the show is become a Locked On Bucs insider. You're going to get news, rumors, updates, general thoughts, one-on-one conversations with me via text message. Go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnBucs or click the link in the show notes to become an insider today. This episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. Diving into the mailbag one more time before things really get going at training camp. We have some good questions rolling in about everything from roster cuts, undrafted rookies, and the impact of a legendary Buck. But we're going to start this one off with a question from Insider Mike. And he asks, who is one player on either side of the ball that might be big surprises in camp? Now, Mike also mentioned players that I'm not necessarily keeping an eye on, but I'm going to cheat because it's my show and I can. And I'm going to start with a player that we have talked about plenty, but I think can really elevate his game and in turn elevate the play of the defense as a whole. And I am talking about linebacker Servassier Dennis. We have talked about Dennis and linebacker Anthony Walker Jr. being in a bit of a battle for that starting linebacker job next to Lavonte David. But with Walker starting training camp on the non-football injury list, Dennis is going to have a chance to get a stranglehold on that job right out of the gate. As we've discussed before, Dennis showed some really good flashes when he was on the field and certainly made some impacts when he had the opportunity. But the shoulder injury was hampering him and preventing him from being able to reach his ceiling. Now, with that shoulder fixed up, he can really play to the level that he's capable of and potentially fill that Devin White role that has been missing since White's departure. Now, it's not like I didn't have my issues with Devin White, and he certainly wasn't immune to criticism from this program, especially after that Super Bowl year. But the Bucs have been missing that guy who can blitz efficiently while allowing Lavonte to roam the middle of the field, drop in coverage, track down ball carriers, all those things that have Lavonte at his best. Those were not the things that were Devin's strong suit. So he was a run stopper. He was a blitzer. Now that job can fall on Servassier Dennis and allow Lavonte to return to what he normally does, which is everything, but now he won't have to do everything all by himself. I think Dennis has some serious work to do in pass coverage, especially tracking receiving options out of the backfield, which is something that we all know that Devin White had severe problems doing. But with Walker out for however long, Dennis is going to get extended reps in order to work on that and really elevate that level of his game as well. I'm not saying it's going to be perfect, but it certainly can't get any worse than what we saw last year at the position. So he's a guy that I'm really optimistic about on the defensive side of the ball. And I think he might surprise some Bucs fans in a good way and make them a little more comfortable about that inside linebacker spot next to Lavonte David. Let me tell you, with the improvements that they have made in the secondary, and as long as those guys stay healthy, if the Bucs are just competent at linebacker, that's going to be kind of the missing piece there to take them from one of the worst defenses last year to one that can help them compete deep into the playoffs. On the offensive side, I am looking at someone to potentially turn some heads and surprise a lot of Bucs fans, and that's tight end Devin Culp. I really liked the limited sample size that we saw from Culp last year. And if Grizz can get him more involved in the offensive game plans, then that adds yet another threat for Baker Mayfield. We have talked extensively about the receivers: Evans, Godwin, Ibuka, McMillan, Tez, Shep. We've mentioned Cade Otton, who is coming off of a career year. We've talked about Bucky and Rashad, that duo out of the backfield. We've talked about Sean Tucker making it a three-headed monster, but two guys that we haven't mentioned much are Payne Durham and Devin Culp. We know Durham did a great job stepping in last year when Otton went down, but Culp was quietly a solid contributor. Now, he only had 6 targets with 5 receptions, but those receptions netted 88 yards, and he got a first down on 4 of his 5 receptions. He was getting nearly 18 yards per reception and played only 11% of offensive snaps all season. He played 35% of special team snaps. Now, Culp emerging as another receiving threat continues to open up options for Baker, especially on third down. You can run with Evans, Godwin, Ibuka, Otton, and Culp in an empty back set, and Culp might end up being the one that slips open unnoticed or has the best mismatch because the defenses will spend all of their resources focusing on the receivers and a proven commodity in Cade Otton. As a 7th-round pick last year, Culp wasn't ever going to get a ton of opportunity, but he made the most out of what he did get. Now, increasing his role could pay huge dividends. He's going to have a better understanding of the offense, a better understanding of his role and responsibilities, but we have to see Culp and Durham take on bigger roles in the offense without question. Otton is not going to last long at the rate that he's being utilized. 70% of offensive snaps as a rookie, then 97% in 2023 and 92% in 2024. That's too much. Way too much. His body is not going to hold up to that level of punishment from blocking or the hits that he takes on these passes over the middle where he shows absolutely no fear, and that's awesome, but it's going to make his career much shorter than it could be. The best tight ends in the NFL do not play that much. Kelsey's career high was 95% back in 2018. Over the last 4 years, his snap counts are 82%, 80%, 77%, and 84%. George Kittle over the same span, 92%, 90%, 89%, 86%. His career high was the 92% in 2021. Brock Bowers as a rookie last year, 85%. Trey McBride has been around for 3 years. He was one of the best tight ends in the NFL last year. His snap counts were 53%, 69%, and 90%. Taking north of 90% of snaps every year just is not sustainable. That's why the Bucs have got to use Durham and Culp more, but I really think that Culp could be in a position where he could take a giant leap forward in his development and production, and he can be around a 15 to 20% snap guy. He and Durham both could honestly be in that 15 to 20% range, and then hopefully we're bringing Otton down to that 80% to 85% range, which is where I think he needs to hover in order to make sure that he doesn't fall off a cliff in terms of production because his body wears down so fast. That's definitely something that I want to keep tabs on, is how Grizz is using those tight ends, what kind of rotation he is starting to implement. Culp could be a really fun and interesting weapon for the offense if he just gets the chance to be on the field more. The way he's going to be on the field more is he has to go into training camp and really show how valuable he can be along with the other weapons in this offense. Can a former Buccaneer elevate the pass rush? That is coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Bucs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Wish managing your money felt easier? With Monarch Money, it can. Whether you're growing your savings or planning a big purchase, Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money is more than just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center where you can track all your accounts, all your investments, all of your spending, all in one place. So in addition to managing your money, you're also building wealth. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track your spending, even plan long-term goals, all in one spot. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first year. Guys, you've probably heard of Viagra or Cialis. Maybe you've even tried them, but if you're looking for something beyond the usual pill, it's time to meet Get Ready. Get Ready is a next-gen prescription treatment designed to amplify arousal in the brain and boost blood flow. Unlike the usual pill that can take hours, its 3-in-1 formula dissolves under your tongue and kicks in fast. On average, we're talking 15 minutes. Effects can last up to 36 hours, so you can stay confident and in control when the moment is right. If traditional options haven't worked, Rugi might be the answer. Over 150,000 men have already made the switch. So head to Rugiet.com/LockedOnNFL. Use code LockedOnNFL to get 15% off today. That's RUGIET.com/LockedOnNFL. Use promo code LockedOnNFL for 15% off. Individual results may vary with prescription treatment. Compounded drugs are permitted to be prescribed under federal law, but are not FDA approved and do not undergo FDA safety, effectiveness, or manufacturing review. Please visit the Rugiet website for full safety information. Thank you again for making Locked On Bucs your first listen review every day. The Locked On NFL is here, voted on by the NFL hosts of the Locked On Podcast Network. Our top 100 was formed by the experts that cover these teams and players every day. Find the full list on Locked On Sports Today on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. And of course, you can go back to last week and check out my reaction to where the Bucs players landed, and where some Bucs players didn't show up at all. Destined for Greatness on Twitter wrote in and asked, do you think the mentor tutelage session with Simeon Rice will finally bring out the Yaya that we have been waiting for? Season of domination coming? All right, Ricky, thank you so much for the question, and here's my take on that. I absolutely think it will help and be part of the picture, but it is not going to be the sole reason. Yaya exploded as a rookie, got 7.5 sacks, but last year he was supposed to be the guy. That didn't happen. And a large part of that was the fact that he was the only guy. Joe Tryon-Shoyinka was never close to what we expected from him. And I think that's one of Jason Light's rare misses in the draft over the course of the last handful of years. Braswell was going through rookie pains as a second-round pick, and no one else outside of Anthony Nelson ever really showed up. There was absolutely no help along the edges. Now, you bring in Hassan Reddick, which is going to give the pass rush a huge boost. And if nothing else, it's going to draw the attention away from Yaya and allow him to get after quarterbacks with a little less resistance. Now, Simeon working with Yaya on technique and moves, that's going to help his development for sure. It's the same with Reddick working with him. The same with Robert Ayers, who is now a coach on the Bucs staff during training camp, working with Yaya. Larry Foote going back to outside linebackers coach. That is going to help as well. So Simeon coming in and working with him a little bit is just a piece of the puzzle. Now it's on Diaby to put all of that information into use. He has to make sure that he follows those tips, follows that knowledge, takes it to heart, and really dedicates himself to making it second nature so that it translates to the field. I do think that there is a decent chance that Diaby leads the team in sacks. Even though they're giving all that money to Hassan Reddick, I think his biggest asset is going to be helping out the younger guys and really attracting a lot of attention from opposing offenses who are going to try and make sure that he's not the one terrorizing the backfield. It's just whether or not Diaby takes advantage. Remember, last year, there were national media members, including Albert Breer, who was predicting double-digit sacks for Yaya Diaby. I think that he can get to that level this year, but he has to show that he's learned from these players and these coaches and that he adapts his game accordingly. Insider JJ asks, if you are Jason Light and Tristan Wirfs shows signs of being able to play faster than the initial projection of 4 weeks, do you move him to the reserve pup list when camp is over to be sure that he's healthy, or do you put him on the active roster and take it week by week? JJ, that's an absolutely fantastic question, and here's my thing. If the initial prognosis is 2 to 4 weeks, I'm going to check in with Tristan. I'm going to check in with the training staff as to where he is in his recovery. If they think that he's still 2 to 3 weeks out from being able to set foot on the field when camp is over, I'm just shutting him down for the 4 weeks. I would rather be overly cautious than potentially allow him to get back out there too soon and make it a season-long thing. Tristan is a competitor. It's going to absolutely kill him to not be out there with his teammates blocking for his best friend, especially if Charlie Heck is getting rocked every game. And then you have Tristan sitting there watching and knowing that he could have been better. Now, the Bucs brought in former Seahawks offensive tackle George Fant on Monday. No word yet as to whether or not a signing is coming, but they are looking for additional depth there at the tackle position. To me, I would rather err on the side of caution, especially with this being so early in the year. Even with the downgrade at tackle, I think the Bucs can go 2-2 in the first month with Wirfs sideline. I need him on the field in December and January more than I need him in September. The Bucs have all of camp, all of preseason to get this figured out. And if that means always having an extra tight end on the left side to help, then that's what you do. If that means having a ton of two-back sets so that one is always there to chip block in case someone gets past Heck, that's what you do. If that means no deep shots and having all of the passes be quick routes to get the ball out of Baker's hands faster, then that's what you do. I want to make sure that Tristan is 100% when he gets back, because if you let him return too soon and this knee issue ends up getting re-injured or you lose him for the season, you are also going to have wasted the entire season. And you think about all the guys on this team that are entering contract years. You have a window here to truly make some noise in the postseason, to make a legitimate run to an NFC championship and potentially a Super Bowl. If you lose Tristan Wirfs, that window is slammed shut, locked, nailed into the frame. You're not reopening it. The Bucs are not going anywhere in the playoffs if Tristan Wirfs isn't on the field. The level of pass rush that you are going to face when you get to the postseason, when we're talking about teams like the Commanders, like the Lions, like the Eagles, you are not going to withstand those teams without arguably your best player. Like Tristan Wirfs, you can make a very easy and legitimate case that he is the best player on the Buccaneers roster. And if you don't have him protecting Baker Mayfield's blind side, if you don't have him going up against the other team's number one pass rushers, it's going to be, if you even make the playoffs, a one and done situation. You have to have him. So if it means shutting him down for a month to protect him from himself, then that's what you do, because you need him in October, in November, in December, and into January if this team is going to have a legitimate opportunity at being successful. Insider Mike asks, who are your first cuts? I appreciate the question, and I wanted to acknowledge it, but I'm not going to answer it. I don't want to go into a deep dive here on that right now, because I'll have my way too early start of training camp 53-man roster prediction coming up later in the week. So I will talk more about cuts on that episode, and I'll be able to dive in kind of my mindset and my process as to who the initial cuts are. But you also have to remember that cuts are not done the way that they used to be. It doesn't go from 53 or from 90 to 70, 70 to 53, or 90 to 75, and then 75 to 53. That process doesn't exist anymore. So the first cuts are all the cuts, but I'll go in depth a little bit as to kind of the first guys off my board to start to wean things down before I get to the tougher decisions. So I will answer that question on that show, just not right now. We are not done talking about the Tristan Wirfs injury. That is coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Bucs. This episode is presented by Yahoo Fantasy. Fantasy football is back. Fire up the group chat, get your draft board ready, and buckle up for a season filled with breakouts, busts, and all the overreactions that we live for. It's all going down on Yahoo Fantasy. This year, me and Locked On Bucs are playing on Yahoo Fantasy, and you should too, whether you're a first-timer or a veteran making your millionth league. I've used Yahoo Fantasy numerous times throughout my 30 years of playing fantasy football. Let me tell you, there's no cleaner or user-friendly platform out there than Yahoo. The info, the layout, everything makes playing fantasy football as easy as possible. To celebrate 28 years of fantasy greatness, Yahoo Fantasy is dropping 28 big new features over 28 days, giving you more ways to play, more ways to draft, and more ways to win. It all begins on August 4th. Stay tuned and get started creating or joining a Yahoo Fantasy Football League at yahoofantasy.com/LockedOnNFL. That's yahoofantasy.com/LockedOnNFL. And let's make this fantasy season the best one yet. Wrapping things up here on a mailbag episode of the Locked On Bucs podcast, and Insider Lakita asks, I'm pretty bummed about the Tristan situation. Is that going to weigh heavy on the players' minds at camp? That's a great question because there is a human element to this, right? I come on here and I talk about players and their performance, what they're doing great, what they're not doing well, and you almost forget, you become so removed from the situation that you kind of forget that you're talking about people. You are talking about regular human beings going through problems. I am sure that, the insiders wouldn't appreciate me coming on here and criticizing their at-work performance. I wouldn't appreciate doing a crossover episode where Ross is critiquing my work performance on a day-to-day basis, but that's what we do to these players, right? Because it is so public, because it does generate all this money, because it is such a passion for millions upon millions of people across the world, that we almost remove the human element. Tristan isn't just a coworker. He's a leader on this team. Everybody inside of that building loves him. He is their teammate, but he's also their friend. He is someone that they care about. So, of course, the players are going to be disappointed that he's not out there with them. They are going to be upset and hurt that he is going through this as a person. But with all of that said, I don't think it's going to affect their performance as individuals. As a team, yes, absolutely. We just finished talking about that. The drop-off in skill from Wirfs to Heck is massive. Again, that's not a shot at Charlie Heck, but he's backing up the best left tackle in the NFL. So there's going to be a drop there. It's just like if Joe Burrow in Cincinnati goes down to injury and they go to Desmond Ridder, there is a massive drop-off in talent. That's nothing personal against Desmond Ridder. He's a great dude. But there's no argument there that the skill level and the gap between the two is large. These guys know the risk of playing the game at this level. When guys like Godwin and Evans and Antoine went down last year, players were disappointed. They were frustrated. It was a gut punch. But then you had to shift focus, and it was the next man up. They had to push forward. That's the nature of playing this game. The bright spot is they know that he's coming back. They know that they just have to handle business until he returns, and then everything is going to get that much better. I think the time for hanging their head and feeling down about it came and went after the announcement. Now that camp is starting up, it's back to work, back to the task at hand. You have to keep moving forward. Insider Reggie says, do you think Desmond Watson has a chance to make the 53-man roster due to his size and strength? He could play a pivotal role in goal line defense and even as an H-back for Bucky, like Refrigerator Perry was for the Bears. All right, Reggie, thank you for the question. I think he has a decent shot at making it for sure, but he's got to be there. Watson was placed on the non-football illness list, and he already has an uphill battle to make the roster as an undrafted rookie. Every day, every practice that he misses, that climb gets a little bit tougher and a little bit steeper. Now, I don't think that there's going to be a time when Watson gets the call as a running back. We saw Refrigerator Perry take some carries over his time, famously had a touchdown in the Super Bowl that Bears fans are still a little upset about. There is a contingency of Bears fans that do not think that Refrigerator Perry should have gotten the ball in that Super Bowl. But kind of like you mentioned, I could see him in a situation where he's a lead blocker on a goal line play to try to clear the way for Bucky or Rashad or Sean Tucker. We've seen them use Vita Vea in that way before, so it is absolutely not out of the question to think that they could use Watson in the same fashion. Of course, he would probably get most of his opportunities on goal line and short yardage situations on defense. Lining up next to Vita to make running up the middle just absolutely impossible. You're not going to tush push. I don't care if it's Derrick Henry. I don't care if it's Bijan Robinson. I don't care if it's Saquon Barkley. I don't care. If you have Watson and Vita Vea lined up next to each other in the middle of that defense, you're not running up the middle. You better be running some sort of play action, or you better be bouncing it outside. You're not running up the middle. That is a brick wall. That is Andre Vasilevsky during the 2020 and 2021 Stanley Cup run level of brick wall. So he's definitely a skilled player, but there's no word yet as to whether or not he's continued to shed the weight that they needed him to. And as I mentioned, he's not participating in practice to start camp. So I need to see what he can do before I really hammer in whether or not I think he makes the team. But I would say he has one of the better chances out of any of the undrafted players to find his way onto this 53-man roster. I think there is a level of concern that if they put him on the practice squad, he's going to get plucked by somebody. They did give him a solid amount of guaranteed money as a priority free agent after the draft. So that will play into his favor as well. But, coming up on my initial 53-man roster prediction, and I'll do another one when training camp is over before they make their announcement. I would say that we're probably going to see 2, maybe even 3 undrafted rookies on my initial roster projection, but that'll be coming up later in the week. Coming up tomorrow, we have Evan Klosky joining, and then we're going to have Rock Riley on the show. Rock is coming back. Always a great time chatting with him. So we're going to get Evan's reaction to the first day of practice at training camp. We're going to get Rock's reaction to what's going on at training camp. And then, of course, the 53-man roster prediction. That is all coming up the rest of the week. Until then, please check out everything going on Twitter at Locked On Bucs, at @JYarcho_Bucs. Follow on TikTok if you use that platform, at Locked On Bucs over there, at Locked On Bucs on Instagram. Become a Locked On Bucs insider. Go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnBucs or click the link in the show notes. If you want to support the show, but you don't want to be an insider, it's real simple. Like the episode on YouTube and leave a 5-star review wherever you get podcasts. Those things do help other Buccaneers fans find the show. And as always, make sure you are subscribed on YouTube with the notifications turned on, as well as wherever you get your podcasts. Hope you all have an absolutely outstanding day. Stay safe, stay healthy, fire the cannons. I want to thank you so much for joining me right here on Locked On Bucs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.